Yeah, we've got a lot of people still joining, but it's noon on the dot, so we are going to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sharon D'Amelio. I'm the Senior Director of Development here at WhyHunger. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're here at a really critical moment. Food need has spiked really sharply in the last several months, and as many of you know firsthand, or from the headlines. And WhyHunger is responding in real time, as many of our partners are, while we're also really keenly focused on longer term solutions. So how we don't end up here again. We've got an incredible group with us. Donors, funders, board members, corporate partners, food banks and pantries, grassroots organizations working all along the continuum of hunger, from immediate access to food sovereignty work. And we'd love to know who's here. So feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat as we get started. Just know your name, maybe who you're representing, if you'd like. So we're really excited to bring this group together today. We know that the only way through this crisis and towards a really different future is together. We plan to host more sessions and conversations like this as the landscape continues to shift. So we hope you'll stay tuned for more or reach out to collaborate. We're really excited to continue the conversation. And now I have the wonderful job of introducing today's speakers. We have Jenique Jones, the Executive Director of WhyHunger, John Cape, our Vice President of Program Strategy and Impact, and Christy Duncan Anderson, who's the Executive Director and President of the Albertsons Companies Foundation. We're especially grateful to have Christy with us. Albertsons has been an incredible partner to WhyHunger and so many other organizations, and a real leader in the philanthropic space and supporting both really immediate food access needs, but also the innovation required to develop and scale lasting solutions. So thank you, Christy, for being with us. And just a quick note about questions. You'll hear from our speakers for about 30 minutes, and we're going to gather your questions throughout. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen rather than popping questions in the chat, because we just don't want to miss them. So just click on the Q&A button, enter your question, and we'll either answer it by typing or we'll answer it live. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jenique.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I was going to say good morning, but good afternoon, everyone. So, you've all seen the headlines. You may be going to the briefings on technical details of new policy rollouts and things like that, but this session is not that. This session is really about understanding the current context, sharing the impact of our work, what we're seeing and hearing from our partners on the front line across the country, and an invitation to deeper conversation about solutions. Some of you know WhyHunger well, others may be new to our work, so let me just start out with like a brief intro to who we are. 50 years ago, singer-songwriter Harry Chapin and DJ Bill Ayers founded WhyHunger with a very simple but radical belief. In a world where there is enough food for everyone, no one should be hungry. Since then, powered by influential supporters, especially across the music industry, thank you, Harry, WhyHunger has worked toward a world where access to nutritious food is not a privilege or a perk, but a right. Our work has evolved over time, and today it spans everything from immediate assistance through our hotline and find food tools for people facing hunger right now, and long-term partnerships with community-led organizations across 24 countries. Those solutions do not look the same everywhere because people and their needs are not the same everywhere. But the goal is shared. Make sure folks have what they need today while building the kind of ecosystem that can actually end hunger in their community. Just imagine a future where our hotline rings less, not more, and not because people stop calling, but because they no longer need it. That is what we are working for. So let's just take a moment to really think about the moment that we're in. In 2023, so this data has not been updated, but in 2023, the USDA reported that more than 47 million people were food insecure. And we know that 42 million people rely on SNAP. But those numbers, they just scratch the surface. They don't capture the parents earning even as little as $10 too much to qualify for help. They don't capture the families balancing on the razor's edge of paycheck of each paycheck, where one flat tire or one medical bill might mean skipping meals. They don't capture the reality that food is the one place people can cut, even when it's the last place that they should. These numbers don't tell the story of parents eating once so their children can eat 3 times. Our neighbors literally forced to choose between rent and dinner, antibiotics and groceries. And I'm setting this context because it might be tempting to think we dodged a crisis simply because the government shutdown ended and SNAP benefits resumed. But even with SNAP, at least 50 million people in this country still don't know where their next meal is coming from. And that's before we consider yet another looming continuing resolution and cuts to essential services. So here's my invitation to us. The government staying open and providing a basic safety net is the floor. It's not the ceiling. If anything, it's the bare minimum we should expect, not a measure of success. So with that, what we can say is that our public systems are strained and the Charitable Food Network is performing heroic, borderline superhuman work to fill the gaps. But they're doing it with shrinking resources. The USDA recently cut $1 billion from schools, community programs, and food banks. The very system people are told to turn to is being starved of the funding required to function. And I can speak to this personally. I spent nearly 14 years working at a food bank. Year after year, we distributed more food than the year before, pallets upon pallets, and still watched the lines get longer. We never, let me repeat that, never met the need. Not once. And that's in a city with multiple food banks, state and governmental resources, and hundreds of pantries. I honestly cannot fathom what it looks like in communities without those kind of resources. But I do know what it feels like for a person to finally reach the front of the line only to be told there's nothing left. And let's talk about the impact this is having on the ground. Because I don't work at a food bank anymore, but those type of things are still happening. And I know that because of what we're hearing from our partners, many of whom are on this call, and it's sobering and it's urgent. We have a food access partner right here in Brooklyn who relies on government funding to operate, pay their staff, and keep their doors open. Those funds have been frozen. They have no clarity on whether those dollars are coming or when. Another partner has seen their ability to order subsidized fresh food slashed overnight because of recent government cuts, forcing them to choose which families get fresh produce and which don't. And partners working on long-term community-rooted solutions, like one in Michigan, who has lost critical funding altogether as community foundations and donors pivot resources simply to plug food access gaps and respond to the immediate crisis. These aren't abstract policy consequences. These are real organizations holding communities together under impossible conditions, making decisions no partner should have to make. And when partners this committed and this resilient are telling us their systems are at a breaking point, we all have to listen. I believe deeply in their work, and I'm endlessly grateful for the colleagues who continue it. But I also believe in a future where food banks, pantries, and soup kitchens belong in the history books. Not because we shut them down and starve them of resources, but because we no longer need them. So what does this all tell us? It tells us something has to change. The crisis we just witnessed shined a light on food insecurity, but even then, we didn't see the full picture. And now that that immediate emergency has passed, millions of people risk fading back into the shadows, unseen, unheard, and unsupported. We need to stand with our colleagues in the charitable food sector who are working around the clock to meet urgent needs. We need to invest more into our Find Food Hunger hotline, and we need to push forward bold, long-term solutions that actually transform lives. Community-led food systems, good jobs, economic stability, and a world where people aren't spending hours in a line for a few days worth of groceries. And now that I've taken us on an emotional roller coaster, I'm going to hand things over to John, who gets to talk about what's next, how we're responding with new, innovative, and frankly, very exciting approaches. Just think of him as the plot twist that brings the hope back in. Take it away, John.
Thanks, Jenique. I'll be that plot twist. Sorry, folks, I think I just lost you.
We can hear you, John.
Oh, you can hear me. Great. I can't see you. So I will. Oh, there we go. Great. Okay, I'm back. Didn't expect that plot twist. My name is John Cape. I'm the Vice President of Program Strategy and Impact at WhyHunger. And I joined WhyHunger earlier this year after nearly a decade working at the nexus of global health and leadership development. I work with an incredible team of leaders who, amongst them, has decades of experience doing this work. And they work directly and closely with our partners around the world and across the US. As Jenique has shared, WhyHunger provides resourcing and capacity building to organizations at the front lines of solving our hunger crises. We are parts of coalitions and movements working to change policies to strengthen the food system. And of course, we work in the US to connect people to emergency food providers. As Jenique mentioned, the emergency food network is complex. There are 60,000 food banks, soup kitchens, community fridges, and food pantries. Each provider has their own hours, their own offerings, their own related support services, whether that's help with SNAP enrollment, whether that's providing personal care items like diapers or feminine hygiene products, or connecting community members to social services like housing and utility payment support. It's a system run by thousands of small local organizations and volunteers. Some have websites, some don't. Some have phone numbers, but not necessarily the staff to consistently pick up the phone. Next slide, please. WhyHunger helps to ensure that people get access to food in an emergency by providing accurate information on emergency food providers in their area. We do that through our Find Food database and our National Hunger Hotline. Our Find Food database includes 38,000 and more food sites. It's searchable by zip code. It lists all of the services each site provides, their hours and contact information. And we continue to invest in this resource. We have a number of tech upgrades that we continue to work on to ensure that the filters are stronger, the map is more comprehensive, and we have more and more emergency food providers represented on the site. We also operate a national hunger hotline, 1-800-5-HUNGRY. Users have the option to text that hotline to interface with an automated system, but many choose to bypass those options to speak to a real human being, especially for those folks who are encountering this system for the first time. It can sometimes feel necessary, sometimes deeply human, to connect with somebody live on a phone who's compassionate and can talk through how to begin to access food in an emergency situation. We have staff and volunteers who are trained to support folks kind of with the dignity and compassion they reserve. Our resources also help to reduce the burden on local food banks and food providers, since we invite them to put our information on their resources. They are stretched right now and not always able to pick up the phone when somebody calls because they're out there trying to support the folks who are coming in their doors to get food. So our database and our hotline allow folks from their community to access the information they need to be able to access those services. Next slide. In 2024, we helped 1 million people to connect to emergency food through our database and hotline. And as Jenique mentioned, demand for the service is soaring. We are on track to reach 2 million people in 2025. There's been a surge in demand, of course, in the last quarter. We've heard from government workers who have been furloughed. We've heard from families whose SNAP benefits were suspended. We regularly hear from folks whose SNAP benefits aren't enough to cover their basic needs, from folks who aren't eligible for SNAP but still are food insecure, from folks who've just lost their jobs, from people who need expensive emergency medical care and don't have enough left to put a full meal on the table. Our Find Food database and hotline are critical, as is our emergency food system for these moments of crises, but this cannot be a long-term solution. So as we work to connect people to food today, WhyHunger is also working with our partners to strengthen the food system for tomorrow. Next slide, please. Our partners work across the US. They're small family farms looking to scale so they can provide more jobs and reach their communities with a greater access point for nutritious food. We work with partners who are building job training pipelines to support people in building careers in sustainable agriculture. We work with lots of small businesses, urban gardens and community co-ops, and folks who are working within their community to protect their local lands and waters from pollution and outside development. It takes all of these things to strengthen our food system. We work closely with movements and organizations across the US, most of whom are led by Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, and who are in it for the long haul. So I'm going to give you an example of one of them. One of our partners, Black Dirt Farm Collective, works in Prince George's County in Maryland. Prince George's County was once the wealthiest majority Black county in the US. However, they've seen increasing poverty and hunger over the last several decades, driven by housing pressure and the rising cost of living. Now, 1 in 7 households in Prince George's County experiences food insecurity. Black Dirt Farm Collective is a coalition of diverse farmers, educators, researchers, seed keepers who are growing the number of Black-led farms in the region and ensuring they have the resources to succeed. WhyHunger has been a partner of Black Dirt Farm Collective for the last 15 years. As they work to strengthen the network of Black farmers in Prince George's County, we've been able to provide capacity building support and resourcing to support them in building infrastructure for cooperative food hub, transportation for a food access program, and to expand their farmer trainee program. We're in the design stage with Black Dirt Farm Collective to support 10 to 15 small BIPOC-led farms to scale through targeted infrastructure grants, business coaching, technical support, and peer learning. This is the kind of work that strengthens local economies, that increases community resilience, and reduces hunger over the long term. It's important that we're taking care of today's needs, but we also need to make sure we're working to transform the system for tomorrow. I'm going to pass it over to Christy, the Executive Director and President of Albertsons Community Companies Foundation, to talk about her perspective from her seat on the challenges and opportunities for today, tomorrow, and beyond.
Thank you so much, John. Hi, everybody. It is such a wonderful treat to be with you all today. It really is to hear from the folks from WhyHunger. I always leave any meeting I have with them just filled with excitement for the future and a real grounding and understanding of what is happening today, but also just so much faith in the future and how I love how you said, only way through is together. I truly believe that. So thank you for sharing that with us. It's still morning for me, Jenique, so happy. Good morning to you as well. It's only 9 o'clock. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, which actually reminds me that you may not know Albertsons Companies, but you may know one of our brands below. I feel like I have a little bit of some sort of a identity problem, which is that I don't know what company I work for until I know where you are. So if you're in Chicago, we're Jewel-Osco. If you're in Philadelphia, it's Acme and Safeway, et cetera. All those brands below are part of our family. I really just want to start with saying that I got into this work not just because it was the right thing to do for the company, but because I deeply, deeply care. And actually, Jenique and I shared that we have a similar origin story to coming to this work. And that is that when my daughter was in kindergarten, they had to bring their own lunches to the after day care while I was working. And one day she asked me, please, can you bring, can I send me with 2 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? And so I would make 2 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And then every day, and I thought, good gravy, this little one is eating so many peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I found out that she was actually giving them to her friend, we'll call her Mia, every day, because she found out that Mia didn't have lunch. And then suddenly there was another child that at one point I was just a peanut butter and jelly making factory over here, and I would send them. And while that was wonderful, every single day they needed another peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And eventually, as happy as I am to provide not just peanut butter and jelly, but other kinds of sandwiches to my daughter's classmates, at some point it made sense to go to the school and figure out, well, how can we make sure that everybody here has lunch? And then how can we make sure that, we have breakfast in the classroom, et cetera? And how can we, instead of trying to give somebody a peanut butter and jelly sandwich every day, how can we make sure that people have access to peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every day, so that we're not constantly doing that? And while I appreciate all those entities that are working today to feed, what I love about WhyHunger is not just about today, but also about tomorrow and forever. And if you wouldn't mind changing the slide, that is the framework that we use for our work. So Albertsons Company's biggest program is called Nourishing Neighbors. We have 2 goals. One is to enable the donation of 1.5 billion meals by 2030 and $10 million annually towards ending the cycle of hunger. I have to tell you that 1.5 billion number is really big and scary, but the harder part is actually the 10 million annually towards ending the cycle of hunger. It's really, really difficult to work through that, but we think of it as today, tomorrow, and forever. So if you wouldn't mind just changing the slide quickly. When we think about today, we think about all those local meals programs, providing meals to neighbors through monetary and food donations, a disaster response, standing by our neighbors in their toughest times, especially, and focusing on hunger during those times, to keep it within the framework that we've set up. And then we do have our holiday gift cards, which I'm very proud to say that we have switched from handing out turkeys to folks in most places to handing out gift cards, so that our neighbors can fill their tables with the food their family loves to celebrate the holidays. And then if you wouldn't mind changing the slide, we also think about it as tomorrow. So today is all of that. Today, we need an immediate meal, immediate satiation now. Tomorrow is really connecting people to federal funding as longer-term solutions to hunger. These programs enable access to consistent nutrition. And so that would be our nutrition security grants, which help connect folks to SNAP and WIC. We work really hard on Summer EBT, which is a fairly new program. And if you haven't checked out our summerebt.org site, it's really cool. Actually, maybe don't check it out right now because it's under a bit of construction for next year. But what it does is it actually helps triage people, finding out what state they're from, asking some questions specific to that state to find out what they need to do next to ensure that they receive the funds for their kiddos during the summer months. And then also those nutrition enhancement programs where these are like produce matches, where if you purchase produce using your SNAP, then we will give a voucher for additional produce moving forward. And then the next slide, please. And then there's the forever. And the forever, that's the hard part. But you know what? We need to do it, because otherwise we're constantly making those peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, right? And so we need to really think about the forever. And but it's the harder work. It's not nearly as everybody likes giving somebody some food, but we also need to really think about how we're going to end this forever. I have to admit, and let's just share this between us here, that while I celebrate the success of all of our partners, I do every time when I get some sort of a update saying that, oh, we fed this many more people this year than last year, or we handed out this many more pounds of food or something like that. It always makes me a little bit sad, I have to admit, because I don't want to hand out more pounds of food. I love when you said what if we didn't have as many people calling into the hotline? Wouldn't that be a success? Not more people calling in, but actually, I'm glad we're there to collect those and to help those folks. But how do we get to less people calling in, and how do we get to ending hunger? And so that's hard work, but it's worth it. One of my favorite programs, I shouldn't have favorites, don't tell the others, is the Spark Innovation Fund. And that's where we actually have an open RFP. It's a kind of an entrepreneurial thing where we say, you know what, tell us your idea. Organizations, tell us your idea of how you could end hunger. I have a deeply held belief that those who are closest to the problem often sometimes are farthest away from access to what is needed for solutions. And so going to these organizations, these local organizations, and saying, what do you see out there? What do you think would end hunger for your community? What would that look like? And then funding those, working within our own company and all the people we have. At Albertsons, we don't just have people who bring in carts or check you out. We also have lawyers and doctors and people who stock the stores, and people are really, really good at figuring out how to ripen bananas. That, by the way, is very interesting process, but that's beside the point. But we have all these people who know how. So we pair you up with somebody who is in that knowledge group, transportation folks, etc., and let's see what we can do. It's a really fun project that we have. And then we think about engagement, and there's a cool project that we work with kids. There's curriculum for elementary school kids, and they learn about hunger in their community. It's eat, explore, act, tell. So they explore, they learn about hunger in their community, they act, they do some kind of a project, and then they have to do some kind of a wrap up PSA or something about it as well. And then we have our volunteer initiative. And new this year is our Nourishing Neighbors Consortium, where there's 40 organizations across the country who have all said, yes, we want to be out of a job. That actually is one of the things I love most about WhyHunger is every single person I've ever met who works for WhyHunger would love to be not working on hunger anymore, would love to not have to do this anymore. Every single person I've ever met. Everybody tells me in this space that they would like to be not needed anymore. But I really, truly believe the people at WhyHunger for this. And the people in our Nourishing Neighbors Consortium are also part of that. There are 40 nonprofits that come together, and they and we kind of are all working on what does this look like? It's a lot of shared experience, a lot of kind of cool things have come out of that. And it's been a really fun group that we've just started. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, I think I have one more slide that has some of the work that we've done. And Nourishing Neighbors has been around for 11 years. We've raised $446 million to anti-hunger organizations, just so that you can visualize that, because that's a lot of money. I don't understand that kind of money. And so if you took those in $100 bills and stacked them up, it would reach about 4 times the height of the Empire State Building. 1 billion meals so far to enable to our neighbors in need. And if each of those were a fork, they would fill a shipping container every single day of the year. They're in 65 shipping containers. 250,000 people connected to SNAP, which is unlocking over 70 million for families in need. 240,000 kids have participated in that program that I talked about in schools. If you wanted to put all those kids on a basketball court, it would take 200 courts to fill up all of those with kids. There's 1,400 organizations in our network. If they all came to a rally and we asked them to drive their car, it would fill up 4 football fields to pack them all in. And we've given over 9,000 grants, which is about 3 grants every single workday since the beginning of Nourishing Neighbors. I just want to close out by saying that I am grateful to be here, and that this, somebody recently told me no crisis should go wasted. And I think that the timing is really right. If you think about, there's been a very small silver lining to a lot of the shutdown activity, and that is that there's a lot more understanding and discussion on what SNAP is, what people who are on SNAP actually look like, and that is you and me. And I think that it is a great time for us to really tackle something that this, as Jenique kind of started out with and alluded to, is a solvable problem. We have enough food. It's just not distributed properly. And so I'm really, really grateful to be here, and really extremely grateful to be working with WhyHunger in all of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Jenique and John. And look at that. We are like 1 minute ahead of schedule. That never happens in things like this. People just talk and talk and talk. So we meant it. We really want to we wanted to share kind of what we're seeing in the landscape, the impact it's having on our work, and how we're thinking about this and thinking about long-term solutions and immediate need. And then really to hear from Christy is another example of the work that's out there. We've got folks on this call. We've got 43 people on this call, all from, board members, donors, other folks in the space, funders. We've got some questions already lined up in the Q&A, which we're going to start answering. Reminder to just use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please put your questions in because we have plenty of time to answer them. And we'll start with this one, Christy, because you were talking a little bit about your kind of KPIs and your impacts. For Christy, what types of KPIs do you look to measure programs that you support that are more focused on economic advancement and longer term food solutions?
Boy, that's a hard question. We are committed to the process of the organization that is doing the work. And so therefore, on a micro level, for each and every one of our grantees within our Spark Innovation, which is mostly the economic mobility work, each one of them, we ask them to set up their own KPIs and their own timeline, because there's not a one size fits all. We debated long and hard, again, between us friends, we debated long and hard about how we were going to set up the macro goal of 1.5 billion meals plus. How do we capture this, ending the cycle of hunger? Do we capture it by the number of people moved out of the cycle of hunger? Do we capture it by, and then how do you define that? And so we ended up with a dollar amount, the $10 million annually towards ending the cycle of hunger. So the KPI is actually money spent. However, we work very closely with each of our grantees on their own KPIs, which we're kind of over time trying to find the trends within them so that we can aggregate and report something. But right now we are really committed to making sure that our grantees are the ones who are determining what those KPIs should be for their projects.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And also just the honesty about like how hard this is, right? I remember you and I had a conversation, God, must have been 5 years ago now, where you were like, if this were easy, we would have done it, right? If we'd figured out how to do this, we'd have done it and we'd all did it and we'd be done. But it's not easy. It's harder than that. And there are complexities to this, and allowing communities to really choose the metrics and the information that's meaningful to their own progress, I think, is a big part of why you guys are so innovative in this space. Thank you. Next question. I'm disappointed that the national conversation on SNAP and food insecurity has left out many stories of suburban poverty. How can the work and legacy of your founder, Harry Chapin, bridge some of that divide? Jenique, I'm going to throw that one to you.
I mean, I think the very fact that Harry's belief was that everyone deserves food really gets at the heart of that, right? It's not I think one of the things around SNAP and food insecurity and all of these things is this like dividing piece of, the haves, the have-nots, and who deserves what, and what you should look like. And I think that, you know, the whole purpose of what Harry believed was none of that matters, that everyone should have the right to food. And I think that we all have to really start to um, kind of speak to that, right? We in ourselves have to get rid of some of our own biases around what we think, who deserves what in all of these different spaces. And I think we also need to uplift and help break down those myths, right? That it's, that we need to be amplifying that. And if when you hear someone talk about the lazy people who just get free food, remind them that in fact most people work. The people who don't are disabled, they're children, they're the elderly, right? Remind them of that, push back on a lot of those narratives. And also, really question, even if someone is lazy, does that mean they don't deserve food? Right? Really get at the heart of these things that people say, right? Even if someone is shiftless or whatever you hear, do they not deserve food? Because you're basically saying they don't deserve to live if you're saying they don't deserve food. So I think it's really upon us to kind of do that. Because that's what Harry was doing, right? When in doubt, do something. And I think sometimes doing something can just be to challenge when we're confronted with some of those narratives. And also the idea that food insecurity and poverty are not actually the same thing. There are a lot of folks who are food insecure who are not in poverty. And we know that, right? We know what the cost of living is. So I think it's all of those things.
Christy, you look like you want to jump in and say something if you want to add something. I'm not limiting the Q&A to one person.
Just voicing my agreement over here. Absolutely. I don't know how my judgment should decide whether or not somebody should eat. I think that's a very good point.
Awesome. We have more. Great. Hi, great info so far. Question for both WhyHunger and Albertsons. I'm curious about the optimal role funders can play. How should funders be thinking about investing in long-term community-based projects that are capable of scale? Does this look the same in the US and internationally? John, maybe you want to take this for WhyHunger, and Christy, obviously for Albertsons.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I guess a few things come to mind. Building a relationship kind of with the folks you're funding is so critical. I gave you the example of our relationship with Black Dirt Farm Collective. That's a decade and a half long kind of relationship. And what that has allowed us to do is to build that trust where in conversation with them, we can understand what those needs are and provide them funding to be innovative year over year so that there's an opportunity for them to learn, to figure out what's working, and to scale those solutions in ways that are contextually specific to the communities that they are supporting. So when I think about funders investing in kind of that long term, it means building a long term relationship. It means providing year over year support. It means reaching for some of those gold standards, right? Multi-year, unrestricted kind of sustainable, meaningful funding for folks, because we're not just investing in those solutions, we're investing in the leaders and the organizations who have the expertise and the lived experience to learn and build kind of what those long-term solutions required. So those are some of the components that I really think about. Christy, how about you?
Yeah, well said. I think it's the long-term relationship. I think it's patient and allowing it to be organizationally centric design. And getting out of the way. I think the best thing funders can do, honestly, is get out of the way. I don't know how to solve hunger really anywhere, but certainly not in Chicago and in Denver and in all these other areas. And I think that making sure that it is uh, focused on the organization that is doing the work and the trust that you need to have and build there, and sometimes blindly go on is important. I think that it's patience and getting out of the way. Yeah.
Thank you. We've got a couple more. We've got one in the chat. WhyHunger, I know WhyHunger's been investing in schools to train people in sustainable farming. It's just such a great effort. Can you share a little bit more about that? Thank you, Diane.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. So we have WhyHunger supports a cohort of schools in the US and internationally who embody the practices of agroecology. Agroecology uh, builds on kind of indigenous ways of working with the land, of sustainable agriculture. Agroecology also supports people in thinking about kind of the culture and kind of the values that drive our relationship with the land and how we build a system based on sustainable agriculture. And so WhyHunger works with several dozen schools, bringing them together to learn from each other, to share resources. We work with them both virtually. We have in-person convenings where they really have an opportunity to understand each other and build their schools. Ultimately, these schools are serving to teach young people from their community both the technical practices, but the cultural and economic ones around building sustainable agricultural livelihoods so that we can increase food access in communities around the world. So it's a really important intervention point, and one we're really proud to support.
Thank you. We've got one sort of very concrete one that I want to read out, and then Christy, there's another one for you as well. How can I reach out to my local organizations and promote connecting them to your like Find Food application? You don't have any of my county organizations connected. Thank you. John, you want to give a little more info on that?
Yeah, let's solve for that. So I think if you just email kind of our we are constantly updating that database. Uh, we can add an email address into the chat, just kind of our general inbox, so you can reach out and connect with us, and we can make sure that we are getting your local organizations onto the website. So we really appreciate that partnership with you.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll put the why at whyhunger.org in the chat, and that you can reach out to us there, and we'd be delighted to add your local organizations and continue to expand our database. Christy, can you give a glimpse into some of the job training and workforce programs you are funding and supporting to work towards longer term solutions?
Yeah, I think this question is around our Spark Innovation, and it's not just workforce training, but and I have to say I love how diverse the pool is of programs that we're working on. We have a guaranteed income program that is paired with financial counseling that is working with folks in the San Francisco Bay Area. We have a project that supports college students and actually more in the technical training area, and helping to level up their college and their training experience. So they bring them in with a food pantry, but then when they start working with the clients, they start talking to them about, hey, you're doing this certificate in automotive. You know, if you did this certificate as well, you would have this much more earning potential, and let me help you get. Then they help them get grants and the wherewithal to be able to do that. There's programs. We're also branching out a little bit into programs that are changing the capacity of some of the emergency food system. For example, there's a program that is looking at transportation and logistics and using an economy of scale in a specific geographic area to have a single transportation and logistics company that is working with several different food banks and pantries, so that there's lots of economies of scale, which then they're investing the rest of the funds into some of the longer term solutions. We have, let's see, I'm just thinking, we have a project that helps with single mothers, and is working on different aspects of childcare subsidies, et cetera, for single mothers. So there's lots and lots of different programs, and it's really fun to see all the differences that people come up with.
All right. Well, we only have about 2 minutes left. So what I might do is we had another question. Just maybe like a final word or thought about what supporters, donors, funders, people should be doing differently in this moment. I'll let you each popcorn. Whoever has the first idea goes.
I don't know if the answer is what we should be doing differently. I think we should all be doubling down on what we do and looking at what we're doing or what change we're trying to see in the world, and how that change can be a more sustainable change, rather than, not that there's anything wrong with the emergency food system. Again, we've said this a million times and it's true, but also, how we how we can look at what we're doing and enhance what we're doing even more.
Do something. I'll take that from our founder. Don't get paralyzed. I think it can be overwhelming when we try to meditate on the full scope of the problem, which is why we do this work in coalition and in community and in partnership. And so finding our slice of the pie to really lean into is critical, and not letting us get afraid of taking action.
Jenique will give you the last word.
And I'm gonna say, policy has a space here, right? And I think that we need to be advocates with the people that we're electing. And I think when they don't do the things for the people, we need to get different folks in those offices. And so I think we don't really use our power, many of us, in the way that we should, and get on the phone and email and spam them, because they work for us, right? And all of these cuts and things that are happening, that's coming from someplace. And so I think, we have to really, use our collective voices to say that these things are not okay. Um, because I think that also will help in terms of so many of us feeling stretched because the resources are drying up. So, I'm going to say, if you're not registered to vote, register to vote. And if you are registered to vote, get on the call and call your congressman, your senator, your local state elected official, your mayor, your governor, literally everyone, your county executives, and tell them that, people deserve food. If they deserve nothing else, they deserve food.
All right. Well, hopefully you maybe were eating during this, and if not, we want to give you some time to have lunch where you are. Thank you again for joining us. We'll be following up with an email with some of the resources and links we provided here in the chat. We'll also have a brief survey. As I said earlier, we want to start doing these conversations and sessions and convening our sort of collective community together more as this landscape shifts. As Christy said, we can't let the crisis go to waste, maybe is what you said. So we're not going to do that. Please check your email, fill out the survey, obviously reach out to us with any questions. We're so grateful that you spent your lunch with us, and we'll see you soon.